Russian UAV destroys Ukrainian 155mm. Bogdana self-propelled artillery. Russia gains territory in Kursk, quelling Ukraine's hopes for a bargaining chip. Israel's airstrike on a northern Lebanese town kills at least 21. Donald Trump requests to move the hush money case to federal court. Suspect denies plotting to assassinate former President Trump. Now, let's dive into the details and the latest updates on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Russian military used a UAV to destroy a Ukrainian Tu-22 Bogdana 155mm self-propelled artillery piece near the village of Novovanikivka in the Zaporizhzhia region. In the video, Ukrainian soldiers were seen hiding the artillery in a forest, but the Russian UAV detected and destroyed it in a single strike. In recent days, Russian forces have stepped up efforts to push Ukrainian troops out of the salient they created in Russia's Kursk region. Battlefield maps compiled by independent groups show that Russian forces have penetrated the western edge of the Ukrainian-created salient in Kursk, recapturing at least 3 villages. Deep State, a group closely associated with the Ukrainian military that analyzes conflict videos, assessed that the situation in Kursk is not favorable. Ukrainian forces are taking measures to stabilize the situation, but it is extremely difficult to reclaim lost areas. Ukraine is conducting the Kursk campaign with 2 main objectives. First, to force Russia to divert troops from other areas to counter Ukrainian forces in Kursk, thus reducing pressure on Ukrainian forces in the east. Second, to capture Russian territory to use as a bargaining chip with Moscow at the negotiating table. The first objective has so far been considered a failure, as the Kremlin has mainly deployed reserve forces from within Russia to the front. Meanwhile, in the east, Russian forces continue to intensify pressure. Kyiv officials are pinning their hopes on the second objective, viewing it as a part of their victory plan. President Zelensky sees the Kursk campaign as one of the stages to end the war, but each new Russian victory in Kursk further weakens the value of this bargaining chip. Meanwhile, Emil Selim, a military analyst for the Blackbird Group based in Finland, noted that some elements from the Russian units have managed to advance relatively far and behind Ukrainian forces, causing numerous problems and losses for Ukraine. Blackbird reported that Ukrainian forces currently control only 777 square kilometers, down from the 1,000 square kilometers they had at the start of the offensive in early August 2024. Selim indicated that Russia's counteroffensives have continuously diminished the political significance of the area controlled by Ukraine within Kursk. If this trend continues, Ukraine may need to reconsider its presence in the region and the future of the entire Kursk campaign. According to a recent report by the World Health Organization, WHO, power outages in Ukraine could last up to 20 hours a day during the coming winter. The report emphasized that the outages could have serious consequences, particularly in urban areas where energy systems are tightly interconnected and often regulate the supply of heating, hot water, and electricity through a single system. Earlier, Ukraine's energy minister announced that the country had lost half of its electricity generation capacity. He estimated that the remaining capacity would not be sufficient for Ukraine to survive the winter, and imported electricity would not make up for the shortfall. Ukraine's energy infrastructure has suffered severe damage due to the conflict with Russia. Minister Galushchenko stated that power plants in Ukraine are operating at maximum capacity, and the country's grid operator has been forced to activate emergency outages. Recently, the Ukrainian military posted a video on social media showing an Su-27 flanker fighter equipped with GBU-39 small-diameter bombs, SDB, marking a significant advancement in precision strike capabilities. The GBU-39 is a small 113.4-kilogram glide bomb designed for long-range attacks under all weather conditions, utilizing active radar and laser GPS or inertial guidance systems, depending on the configuration. The GBU-39 can penetrate hardened targets and avoid detection by enemy air defenses. Its operational range varies from 75 to 110 kilometers when released from high altitude. Its compact size allows aircraft to carry multiple glide bombs during missions, maximizing strike capabilities while minimizing collateral damage. The The BRU-61A rack can carry up to 4 GBU-39 bombs, significantly enhancing the payload and combat effectiveness of fighter jets. On September 30th, the U.S. Department of Defense signed a long-term contract with Boeing worth up to $6.9 billion, including the production of GBU-39 bombs through 2035. The contract also covers the provision of these bombs to allied nations such as Japan, Bulgaria, and Ukraine under the Foreign Military Sales (FMS) program. Regarding the conflict in the Middle East, local health officials recently reported that at least 21 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike in northern Lebanon after the country expanded its operations amid the ongoing conflict with Hezbollah forces. The strike targeted the town of Aito, predominantly populated by Christians, hitting a makeshift shelter for displaced families, resulting in at least 21 deaths and 8 injuries. Following the airstrike, rescue workers at the scene searched through the rubble from October 14th. The area was littered with damaged vehicles and scorched trees. Previously, Israel had called for the evacuation of residents from 25 villages in southern Lebanon to areas north of the Awali River, approximately 60 kilometers north of the Israeli border. On October 15th, the Israeli Prime Minister's office stated, "We are listening to the opinions of the U.S., but will make our final decision based on our national interests." According to the Washington Post, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a statement to U.S. President Joe Biden, decided to target military objectives in Iran rather than oil or nuclear facilities. This response would be limited to prevent a full-scale war, and retaliatory actions would be adjusted to avoid political interference or misunderstandings in the context of the U.S. elections. This statement was issued amid escalating tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, with Israel expected to retaliate for Iran's missile attack on October 1st. Previously, U.S. President Joe Biden had declared that he did not support any Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. The Gulf nations also actively lobbied Washington to prevent Israel from targeting Iran's oil facilities amid growing concerns over global oil market imbalances as the conflict continued to escalate. The United Nations peacekeeping mission in Lebanon was attacked up to 20 times in just half a month, causing international outrage. The UN Security Council held an emergency meeting, with the European Union strongly condemning the incidents, while Turkey urged the international community to act to uphold international law. In a recent statement, the UN Security Council stressed the seriousness of the incidents. Pascal Biz, Switzerland's permanent representative and the president of the UN Security Council, stated that the Council called on all parties to respect the safety and security of UN peacekeepers and facilities. We reiterate that UN peacekeepers and facilities should never be the target of an attack, the Council emphasized. The role of peacekeeping forces in stabilizing the region was acknowledged, while there was also deep concern for the civilian casualties and suffering in the area. Infrastructure is being destroyed daily, and the number of people displaced is increasing. Meanwhile, Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel Álvarez Bueno stated that the attacks by Israel and gunfire on peacekeeping forces must stop, calling such actions unacceptable and contrary to the United Nations Security Council resolutions and the organization's founding principles. In response to the accusations and international criticism, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized that claims of intentionally targeting UN peacekeepers were entirely false. On the contrary, Israel had repeatedly requested that the United Nations forces stay away from danger, asking them to temporarily leave the conflict zones near Israel's border with Lebanon. However, the UN affirmed that the peacekeepers would not abandon their positions in Lebanon. The High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy of the European Union, Josep Borrell, also voiced support for the UN's decision not to relocate. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan urged the international community to act to ensure that Israel complies with international law, stating that the inability of the UN to protect its personnel is a source of shame and concern for the global system. Turkey questioned what the UN Security Council was waiting for to stop Israel. He illustrated the gravity of the situation by imagining Israeli tanks entering UN facilities, attacking peacekeepers, and injuring soldiers, while the Security Council merely watched, calling this inaction a demonstration of powerlessness. In any conflict, women and children are always the most vulnerable. And in Lebanon, many pregnant women are now facing risks of premature birth and limited access to medical care. Many newborns are consequently experiencing health issues from birth. In the neonatal intensive care unit, Dr. Wath Nicholas Bini was caring for a premature baby girl and her twin brother, born early when their mother was forced to evacuate from southern Beirut due to bombings. This is a direct impact of the airstrikes. Everyone is scared, especially pregnant women, who may deliver early or even suffer miscarriages. Kotani Yine, one of the expectant mothers in a similar situation, was deeply worried for her unborn child's safety, prompting her to move to an apartment near the hospital where she planned to give birth, even though her area had not yet been targeted by attacks. The frequent airstrikes nearby heightened her fears. Pregnant women feel very anxious when they hear loud noises. If they give birth under such conditions, the baby will be stressed, the mother may suffer from depression, and there will be health complications. It is estimated that there are currently around 11,600 pregnant women in Lebanon, with approximately 4,000 expected to give birth within the next 3 months. However, access to prenatal, postnatal, and pediatric care is becoming increasingly challenging due to the escalating conflict. Many people from southern Lebanon or the suburbs of Beirut have been forced to flee their homes to give birth in safer areas. The instability has caused anxiety and stress, with some women even considering inducing labor early to avoid risks associated with keeping the baby in the womb under such circumstances. Amidst these difficulties, the UN Refugee Agency stated it is intensifying emergency response measures to provide humanitarian aid and protection for mothers, children, and displaced individuals in Lebanon. Turning to the latest updates in the 2024 U.S. presidential race, lawyers for former President Donald Trump recently requested that the case in which he was indicted by a New York state court for concealing hush money payments to a pornographic film actress be transferred to federal court. If the case is moved, Trump could potentially end the prosecution process if he is reelected president. His legal team filed an appeal with the U.S. rights to this. Second Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan, after Judge Alvin Hellerstein denied the request to transfer the case on September 3rd. Previously, in May, Trump was charged with 34 counts of falsifying documents. In their appeal, Trump's legal team cited a July 1st Supreme Court ruling that former presidents cannot be prosecuted for official actions taken during their time in office. They argued that evidence related to Trump's official actions had been improperly used during the trial, claiming the state's charges infringed on presidential powers as defined by the U.S. Constitution. According to U.S. law, civil or criminal cases involving federal officials can be transferred to federal court if they pertain to official duties performed during their term. Trump's lawyers, Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, contended that the use of evidence related to the president's official actions violated the Constitution and jeopardized the ability of future presidents to carry out their roles. In a related development concerning an assassination plot against former President Trump, U.S. media reported that a suspect arrested outside his campaign event in California denied planning to assassinate the former president. In a phone interview, the suspect, V. Miller, who is out on bail after posting $5,000, said he brought 2 guns to the rally for self-defense, as he had received threats linked to his work at America Happen Network. Miller accused Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco of making false statements about the incident at a recent press conference, stating that he had hired a lawyer to sue Bianco. The authorities have found no evidence indicating that Mr. Miller planned to assassinate former President Trump in this latest alleged attempt. Public records show that Miller is a member of the Republican Party, and he told the media that he is a supporter of Trump and was shocked by his arrest and the accusations against him. Sources close to Trump's campaign also stated that they did not consider Miller's actions to be an assassination attempt. In other significant news, Russian President Vladimir Putin recently officially submitted a draft national treaty to Russia's State Duma, seeking approval for the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea. According to various Russian media outlets, Putin's proposal for ratifying the treaty with Kim Jong-un, which was reached during his visit to Pyongyang last June, has been filed with the legislative body. Under the signed treaty, the two nations agree to cooperate to ensure long-term peace and security at regional and international levels. Russia and North Korea commit to establishing global strategic stability and a fair multipolar international system, building their partnership based on principles of mutual respect for national sovereignty and territorial integrity, non-interference in internal affairs, equality, and other principles of international law. The treaty includes a provision stating that if either party faces an armed attack from one or more countries and finds itself at war, the other party will immediately provide military and other assistance by all means possible, following Article 51 of the United Nations Charter and national laws. Additionally, both sides pledge not to sign any agreements with third countries that would harm the sovereignty, security, territorial integrity, freedom of choice, or political, social, economic, and cultural development of the other party. The treaty also reflects the opposition of Russia and North Korea to Western sanctions, describing them as illegal, unilateral, extraterritorial coercive measures that violate international law and the UN Charter. Both countries agreed not to impose such sanctions on each other. The Russian Ministry of Defense stated that it held defense and military talks with China to strengthen bilateral relations. Russian Defense Minister Andrei Serdyukov mentioned having substantive discussions with Zhang Yuxia, vice chairman of China's Central Military Commission. The military departments of both countries reached a consensus on global developments and identified actions needed under the current situation. Meanwhile, China's Ministry of Defense stated that the two nations aim to deepen and expand their military relationship and continue high-level exchanges. China and Russia declared an unlimited strategic partnership during President Vladimir Putin's visit to Beijing in February 2022. Later, in March this year, President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping committed to ushering in a new era of bilateral relations. South Korea's military announced that it had fired warning shots south of the military demarcation line, dividing the two Koreas in response to previous actions by Pyongyang. North Korea had declared 11 dangerous zones along the inter-Korean border. South Korean authorities announced that these 11 areas, located in 3 cities, Paju, Gimpo, and Yeoncheon, were designated dangerous zones as a precautionary measure to protect residents' lives and safety amid worsening inter-Korean relations. Earlier, the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff said they had fired warning shots after North Korea blew up a section of the road connecting to South Korea, declaring a complete severance of road and rail links once considered symbols of inter-Korean cooperation. North Korea is expected to build defensive structures on the severed road, and South Korea's Ministry of Unification condemned what it called an unusual act by Pyongyang, accusing it of violating inter-Korean agreements. On the same day, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs urged all parties to avoid escalating tensions and to seek a political solution to maintain peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. With North Korea's destruction of the road connecting the two Koreas and South Korea's declaration of 11 dangerous zones in Gyeonggi province along the inter-Korean border, tensions on the peninsula appear to be at their highest since President Yoon Suk-yeol took office. Although some analysts view North Korea's actions as a form of shock therapy, similar to previous incidents, the potential for local conflicts remains high if effective measures are not taken to manage the situation. In another development, tensions are escalating between India and Canada as both countries expelled diplomats on October 14th in connection with an investigation into the death of a Canadian citizen last year. The Indian Ministry of External Affairs announced that 6 Canadian diplomats, including the High Commissioner, must leave the South Asian country by midnight on October 19th. Earlier, India had also expelled 6 senior Canadian diplomats with the same deadline and withdrew its diplomatic mission from Canada. move followed Ottawa's accusation that the Indian High Commissioner and other diplomats were linked to an ongoing investigation into the death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian citizen of Sikh origin who was a leader in the Sikh community in Canada and was killed in June last year. And in a statement on October 14th, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that Canadian authorities had requested cooperation from the Indian government to investigate the case, but the request was denied. India has consistently dismissed any suspicion of involvement in the death of the individual in question. The World Health Organization, WHO, announced that it had received financial support commitments totaling up to $1 billion at a conference in Berlin, Germany. The conference was part of the WHO's new financial framework launched in September, aiming to raise funds through 2028 to improve global health issues. At the conference, the WHO secured nearly $700 million in new funding commitments, along with $300 million in renewed commitments from countries and organizations. Notably, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz pledged nearly $400 million over the next 4 years, including more than $260 million from new voluntary contributions. In addition to Germany, many other countries and organizations, including 16 African nations, also made funding commitments. These contributions represent not only financial support, but also international solidarity in addressing global health crises. The WHO's new financial mechanism aims to mobilize over $7 billion for its 2024-2028 budget, which amounts to more than $11 billion in total. The organization also plans to continue seeking contributions at the G20 summit in November in Brazil to further strengthen resources and ensure rapid response capabilities in the future.